Hi everyone, it's Mr. B, and in this podcast we're taking a look at living things and the environment. In class we did a nature walk and we had an opportunity to go out and look at all kinds of living things, and we actually were in their environment. So we're going to take a look at how those things work together and how they are separate. The first thing we need to do is we need to talk about the definition of an organism. So basically an organism is any living thing. So it could be a plant, it could be a human, it could be a squirrel, it could be a bird. All of those things are organisms, and so it's really good for us to be able to give it a definition. And so organisms are living things. The way that we decide if something is an organism also, aside from being living, is it able to obtain some source of food? Is it able to get some source of water? Does it have a shelter? And then is it able to live? Is it able to grow? Is it able to reproduce from its environment? And so taking a look at this lion, you can see that obviously it's able to get its own food, it gets its own water, its shelter. In this scenario looks like it's some type of tall grass prairie, and it's able to grow and reproduce as well. Looking down here at this one, this is an example of a habitat. And the definition of a habitat is an environment that provides the things that organisms need to live, grow, and reproduce. So let's take a bird for example. If a bird was to fly into this habitat, would it be able to find its source of food? Well, I'm assuming that if we walked around far enough into this habitat, we would discover that there would probably be some type of berries or some types of nuts or seed that would be somewhere for it. So I think there would be a source of food in this habitat for a bird. Obviously you can see in here that there is some water, so there would be a source of water, and there are plenty of trees for the birds to build their nest, and so we know that this organism would be able to survive in there. So it would meet the organism's needs, and then obviously it would be able to live, grow, and reproduce. So this suits a good habitat for a bird. When we went for the walk, on our nature walk, we were able to take a look at different organisms that were out there. So we saw a bunch of trees, some of you saw a frog, some of you were able to see the bald eagle, which we saw on Monday, so that was kind of cool to see. But even that provided the food, the water, and the shelter for organisms to be able to look at. So a habitat serves as a place for an organism to live, grow, and reproduce. So that's the definition of a habitat. We said in class you made a T-chart that looked something like this, and you had living and you had non-living over here. And what you were doing is, as we went for our walk, and you even saw it in the pictures, so the things that we did in class, we said that living things are biotic. And so the biotic factors, the things that are the living parts of the habitat, we were able to name a whole bunch of them. And so if you look up in this picture up here, you'll see that there are trees, so we could say that living part would be a tree. Looks like there's some grass. There is, I'm sure, some birds that are in there, but you get the idea. The idea is that you're naming living things, and so what we would say is that those are the biotic factors, the living parts of the habitat. So animals and plants, anything that's living would be a biotic factor. And the other side of it, the non-living parts, are oftentimes referred to as the abiotic factors, and these are the non-living parts of the organism's habitat. The one that I've been stressing to you is the sun. Obviously light is very, very important for organisms that are photosynthesizing. All organisms need water. We need oxygen to be able to survive. Most organisms do, with the exception of some bacteria. Temperature, is the temperature warm enough? Is it too cold or is it too hot? And then obviously soil, depending on what type of organism you are. And so in this picture we could name things like sunlight, we could say oxygen, we could say the soil, and so you could keep naming. It could have been a rock that's in there, and that rock could be shelter for some organisms. But basically, biotic and abiotic are two different ways of describing living and non-living things. Organisms interact with both the living and non-living parts. So when we went on that walk, we were able to see how the frog or the bird depends on a source of food. It depends on possibly the oxygen to breathe, and so living and non-living parts are a part of a habitat. So the definition of habitat we already discovered is that it has to be able to provide the organism the ability for food, water, and shelter. But both the non-living and living parts work together. Oftentimes the living things are relying on the non-living parts. And so this zebra up here is obviously going to eat the organism of the tall grass, but that tall grass is kind of using the soil, which is non-living, to give it the right amount of acidity to be able to grow. It's also relying on the sunlight to be able to help it grow. And so that's an example of how an organism interacts with both the living and non-living parts of its habitat. This whole study of how living things interact with each other is known as ecology. And so I took a picture of, I took a picture off the internet of an ecologist that was by, he's by one of the trees in a forest out in California. But basically we're looking, if you're an ecologist or in the field of ecology, you're studying how living things interact with each other and their environment. Now, scientists have a way of organizing different things based on their size. And we did an activity that asked you to kind of look at things like North America. And you had, I'm just going to abbreviate here, America. And you had US, so the United States. And then you also had Wisconsin, and you also had Washington County, and then you had Kewaskum, and then you also had KMS, our middle school, and then you also had my classroom. And so a lot of you set it up this way. You went either largest, North America, to the United States, to Wisconsin, to Washington County, to Kewaskum, to KMS, to Mr. B's class, or you went the other way around. But that was kind of your way of organizing it. And the same thing holds true for the way that scientists organize things. They basically look at it and say, what is our smallest group? And our smallest group is a species. And the species is a group of organisms that are physically similar and can mate with each other and produce offsprings that also can mate and reproduce. So we could actually say that the first level of organization is a species. And the species then are all members of one species in a particular area. So a group of species of all of the same type, they make up what we call as a population. And so a population is going to be all the members of one species in a particular area. So if we were to look at these monarchs, okay, these butterflies are all the same type. Okay, they're all the monarch butterfly. And so we could say that this is a population of monarchs. The species is the monarch, and the population is all of these members grouped together. Or you could do the example that I have, all the red squirrels in Kewaskum. Okay, so it's not all the not all the trees in the forest like maples and oaks, but instead it's specifically one item. So if you had a group of if you had a forest that was just filled with red squirrels, we could say that its population was red squirrels. Okay, most of the time we don't have just one particular species in an area because they all come together to be a part of an ecosystem. But species, if you have just one species and it's all the same, it makes up a population. And so there are many populations that join together to make what is known as a community. And so let's flip it over here. You'll see that the community is the different populations that live together. Example was the red squirrel, the gray squirrel, and they're all in Kewaskum. So here you had one population of red squirrels, one population of gray squirrels, and so you've put them together now and they make up a community. So when you have two populations, they make up a community. And I also took this this image. This is a walleye. Okay, so this is an example of a walleye. And you can have a population of walleye, but you know that if you've ever gone fishing before, you don't catch walleye all the time. Sometimes you'll bring up this guy, which is a bluegill. And so this population of walleye and the bluegill together make up that term community right there. Okay. So if we have a group of species of single organisms and they make up a population, and if you combine populations, they make up a community. And now if we incorporate the non-living parts, we are referring to an ecosystem. Okay, so if you have the non-living parts, now that's part of the ecosystem. And so an ecosystem is the community of organisms that live in a particular area along with their non-living surroundings. So an example could be the squirrel, both the red squirrel and the gray squirrel, and you have rabbits that are incorporated, you have another living organism, grass, and you have a non-living organism of sun, you have another non-living organism of water. They're all together in one area. We refer to that as an ecosystem. So if we were going to go from largest to smallest, we could refer to an ecosystem as being the biggest because it has both the non-living and the living, and then we could go to the next smallest, which is going to be a community, which is a bunch of different populations that are living together. Getting smaller, we could say that we have a population, and then if we have a specific individual, we refer to them as a species. Okay, and what happens is that this ecosystem makes up something that is called a biome, and we talk about that in our next chapter, so I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I want you to kind of be aware that our ecosystems make up biomes, which make up our biosphere. So I just want to plant that for you so that way you know that that's coming down the road. But don't worry about these two because of the fact that that's something that we'll talk about in the next chapter. But please do understand that a species is one single organism, and if you have more than one together, we call that a population of the same species. When you have a couple different populations together, we call it a community. And when you have the non-living parts like sunlight, soil, oxygen, along with the different populations, which we now know as a community, that creates an ecosystem. So here it is again, the smallest level of organization in a single organism, which belongs to a population that includes other members of its species. The population belongs to the community of different species. The community and the abiotic factors come together to form the ecosystem. So that's it for section 1. We'll talk to you later.